glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. All right, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark. How are you getting on?
Not bad at all. Busy week at work. Very excited to talk about some video games, Lewis. I think we just get right stuck into it.
Let's do it, yeah.
I'm going to start with what I've been playing this week because it's the same thing. It's Horizon. Honestly, ladies and gentlemen, I don't have too much to add. Therefore, I don't want to waste your time talking about it. One thing that I will say, the last time we sort of seriously spoke about Horizon, I was saying that the underwater stuff wasn't massively prevalent in the game or anything like that. And I also joked that unless the last portion of the map was basically entirely water, it definitely wasn't like a huge part of the map or anything like that. Lewis, I would say conservatively, 70% of the remaining map was water.
Oh, seriously?
Honestly, it was insane. It was so much water.
I cannot believe that. Oh my god.
However, what I will say is that it's largely just like an obstacle to cross, e.g. you have to get like a boat. It's not like more underwater sections.
Right, okay.
I just thought it was quite hilarious that I'd said that, and then honestly, 70% might be too low an estimate. It was almost entirely water. It was insane.
Jeez.
However, as I said, I'm very much in the final stages of the game. The game is absolutely fantastic, looks absolutely fantastic, genuinely interesting story. Combat is absolutely stellar and I think is completely underrated. It's probably one of the best open world games I have ever played, certainly one of the best that I've played in a long time, and it is every bit as good as Ghost of Tsushima, giving it some high praise, if not better, is what I would say. It is a fantastic game.
Nice.
Everyone with a PlayStation should seek it out if it is your sort of thing. But Lewis, what have you been playing?
Well, I mean, it's just the
Elden
same
Ring,
thing
isn't it? I don't know why I'm asking. I don't know why I'm asking.
It is just more Elden Ring, but I suppose, I mean, the game for me is still so expansive that there is still plenty to talk about. So I'll touch on my progress from this week. And I've finally made some progress. I would say, Mark, I feel like over the course of the last week, I've kind of finally fallen just about in love with Elden Ring.
Nice.
I mean, obviously, up till now, I've been really positive about it because, you know, my early experiences were great, but I had concerns. I had concerns that a lot of the time I felt like I was riding around in an open world, killing kind of the same enemies again and again and harvesting resources. You know, you can just find plants and stuff around the world as you go that you kind of need for crafting and stuff. And other than a couple of boss encounters and like 1 or 2 interesting dungeons, I wasn't really getting much more than that, to the extent that I'd heard other people talking about the game. So I knew it was all to come, obviously, but I just was kind of like, oh, I've been playing this for like 15 hours now and like not a great deal has happened and I'm kind of just in this nice forest place, but that's sort of it. And I have finally made some really interesting progress. Started with a journey into a dungeon that I didn't know existed. I just found this, what turned out to be this enormous subterranean elevator that took me from fairly near where you start the game down into this completely crafted but still quite big and open space. I won't say where it is, I won't spoil anything about it, but it's beautiful. You might have seen screenshots of it on Twitter and stuff. It looks completely different from the starting point of the game, and it just felt a lot more like a typical Souls experience, or, you know, for me, a typical Bloodborne experience, in that it was a sort of designed area that had, you know, a flow from start to finish of where you were trying to go and what type of enemies would be there, and almost a kind of semi-puzzle element where you're trying to light these towers, these little obelisks, kind of light them on fire. And I think what it is building to is that lighting all of these fires will reawaken a boss, and then you'll have to fight this giant elk thing. It's pretty standard stuff, yeah. But I mean, and it was a really challenging area, and one of my friends who's playing it said to me that he never got there until about 60 hours in, and I'm still about 20. So, you know, it was a slog getting through it, but I just kept pushing forward because I was like, this place is really cool. I really like what they're doing here. I want to see this side of the game that's a lot less about the open world and a lot more about your typical crafted Souls experience, and that's what From Software is so good at, is world design and level design and world building. So that part of it has been fantastic. I kind of reached a natural point where I thought, I can't really push this any further, I'm getting slaughtered by these guys, I'll just fast travel away, because that's something that you can do in Elden Ring, and try out some other parts of the map that I hadn't yet explored. And doing that led me to actually do the first story boss, or what I assume is the first story boss, certainly the first boss I've encountered where I got a proper cutscene and some other stuff happened after it. A character called Margit. You've probably again seen people talk about this on Twitter, because it's the first big skill check really that you have to do to get further forward in the game. And because I've obviously leveled up quite a lot in the open world, it wasn't a massive slog, but it was still a really difficult fight the first couple of times I tried it. Again, this castle that you encounter him in and then that you proceed through after that boss fight is so good. It is just, again, really classic like Souls level design. I went this whole one direction and I found these enemies, standard enemies, that were absolutely whipping my ass, and I doubled back and went a different way and ended up like looping around to the same place and suddenly being like, oh my god, I'm here, I didn't realise that these were all going to connect. That means I can skip these guys who were killing me really easily.
That's always a great moment in one of those games, that it is so good.
It's just so good, and it the actual look of this castle is fantastic. It's dark and dingy, but then you'll suddenly be out in this kind of battlement getting attacked by eagles. A lot of it happened in one kind of long play session, which is something I'd struggled to do with Elden Ring up till this point. And obviously, if anyone remembers all of our chats about Bloodborne when I was playing that, it's so important to get a bit of momentum going with these games, I think.
Definitely.
And so yeah, I finally feel like I've cracked into it, and I've got a weapon that I really like. I've got a kind of sweet like Darth Maul style double-ended blade thing. You can then wield that two-handed, and it's just super quick. It's changed my playstyle already. Making progress, really kind of getting into the groove with it, and I've kind of unlocked what is essentially like the hunter's dream, this sort of safe zone that you can go to.
Sure.
And which, I am about 20 odd hours in and I still hadn't got that, so that sort of tells you what the game is kind of capable of doing. There's definite tensions between this kind of open world design and typical Souls design, and there's things about it, as I say, getting to the first story boss and knowing that that's supposed to be a skill check, and finding that actually with my progression thus far I'm kind of okay with it. Like, that could be different. That is not the typical Souls experience. Like, I remember fighting Father Gascoigne in Bloodborne and just being at it for ages, and obviously this game allows you to approach it differently, and that's great from like an accessibility point and a sort of onboarding new players point. I could imagine that some other players might not like it, but again, it's all in your control. That's the thing. Like, I didn't have to go and do those things and level up. I didn't have to explore that much, and I'm sure there'll come another point where I'll fight a major boss and it will fuck me up and I'll have to go into more exploration and kind of open world leveling up. So yeah, I'm finally in the groove with it. I'm really happy to be reporting that, because I had slight worries about it, but not anymore.
Nice one, man. That's awesome. I'm very happy that you're sort of finally in the throes of it properly, do you know what I mean, rather than just sort of dicking about and leveling up.
Yeah, riding around.
That's exactly what you were going to do. No, man, that's awesome. Really great to hear. To be honest with you, I had no doubt that at one point or another you were going to fall in love with this game, so I'm glad it's finally come. Alright, Liz, I think it's time for the news. Alright, Liz, news item number 1. E3 2022 has officially been cancelled. This news was first broken weirdly by the Razer PR lead Will Powers, but has subsequently been verified and reported on by Rebecca Valentine over at IGN. The organisers, the ESA, had officially been planning an in-person E3 event this year, this following no event in 2022 and an online event in 2021 due to the pandemic. This obviously comes off the back as well of publishers putting out their own presentations, obviously because of the pandemic as well, mostly successfully, and I think a lot of them have realised that they really don't need an E3 style event, at least in the way that we previously have understood E3 to be. Last month, EA cancelled their E3 adjacent showcase, EA Play Live, which was sort of a part of E3, sort of not a part of E3, and instead are opting to make announcements as and when they are ready to be made. Sony have obviously not been part of E3 since 2018, and Microsoft, now owning Activision and Bethesda, have removed two of the big players that could theoretically be in the lineup as well. The ESA have now made this statement regarding the cancellation.
We will devote all our energy and resources to delivering a revitalised physical and digital E3 experience next summer. Whether enjoyed from the show floor or your favourite devices, the 2023 showcase will bring the community, media and industry back together in an all-new format and interactive experience. We look forward to presenting E3 to fans around the world live from Los Angeles in 2023.
It is worth pointing out as well that right off the back of this, Jeff Keighley, not missing a single fucking beat, confirmed that the Summer Games Fest live event would indeed still be going ahead this year. Now, we can come on to whether or not we actually think that a presentation is going to happen in 2023, but man, this is just a bit sad, I think. E3 has been like a staple of the gaming calendar for so long. We launched this podcast, Lewis, with 2 E3 recap episodes, which I really enjoy doing. Like, I really enjoy doing that style of episode, and E3 just gave us an opportunity to do a lot in a row. I understand as well, obviously, that the relevance and importance of E3 is now extremely questionable, but it is a sad end to an important piece of like the video games industry and just video gaming culture in general, I guess. It really is. But Lewis, on to the pivotal question here. Do you think that we will actually get an E3 presentation in 2023? And if we do, what form do you think that will take?
Well, yeah, just want to echo first, the sadness at this cancellation and what it might represent for the future of E3, which is something that, we've been, watching and celebrating since we were kids, really. I mean, even before we really understood what E3 was, No, I don't think that there will be an E3 next year, basically.
Simple as that.
I mean, there's every chance that the ESA will put something on, but I don't think what we think of as E3 will ever happen again. Certainly not via the ESA. I don't think they can. I agree with kind of what you were suggesting there, that it doesn't really need to be a thing anymore, because it's one of the takeaways from the pandemic, right? We all suddenly learned that you could do these things completely differently. You didn't have to do it on a stage with a camera crew set up. You can present these games differently, and most of these big publishers have kind of just decided to go forward in that way and save the money on the big presentation. So no, I don't think we'll see it in the way that we recognise it. If something does happen, I would think that they might try and move slightly more towards the sort of like Gamescom model of it being slightly more about just fans all getting together and less of a kind of behind closed doors thing. I
think that that's about right. I think that the E3 as we knew it, big huge showcases, stages, 2-hour long presentations and all that sort of expensive, frankly, style of showcase, I sort of think that is gone. I sort of think that we'll not really see that again, certainly not in the way that we were used to seeing it at E3. I think the ESA are going to put on something and call it E3. I don't think it's going to be that. I think you're right. I think that we'll more than likely will have a Gamescom opening night live style maybe presentation where it's a conglomerate of everyone can get in on the action sort of thing. Everyone hopefully from Nintendo, everyone under Microsoft's umbrella, maybe they can entice Sony back or whatever. It could still be good, but is it going to be E3 as we know it? Really, probably not. I think that style of E3 is gone, and it's frankly not necessary anymore, really, for very many reasons. But for these publishers, I think that they've all really just realised we can do this ourselves, we can do this well, and we don't actually need this ESA platform, this E3 platform to be able to do this. We don't need to stick to their schedule. We can do this when it's convenient for us. And I think that in a lot of ways that is quite reasonable. It's disappointing for the fans because it was such a big spectacle in the gaming calendar, like I was saying, but at the same time you've got to move with the times a little bit, right? And E3 didn't.
No, I think that's so telling as well that they haven't come back this year when most others have. GDC went ahead, the DICE Awards went ahead.
Everyone went ahead. I mean, I don't know any showcase that's still cancelled.
Yeah, whether in person or digitally or both or whatever, like pretty much everything else has gone back to trying to do something. I think what this represents is an admission really by the ESA that one of two things: either that they didn't really know what format to take up now that they knew things had to change, and there was that whole conversation with Keighley involved about the direction they were going in and that he didn't want any part of it anymore.
Sure, and then that's why he splintered off.
Yeah, it seems like maybe they didn't actually have anything, or that they just couldn't get the backing for it, that they've gone around the publishers and everyone's kind of going, well, no, sorry, like we're not paying for that, you're not relevant in the way that Keighley is and can kind of offer us different things. So yeah.
Keighley's come out of this looking fucking golden,
totally,
he? Like...
totally has, and I think it helps to have a presence like him. Like the ESA is this kind of faceless, like lobbying body, whereas
Keighley
he is a guy that we all know.
The ESA's guy before this,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before all this kicked off and he was doing his own stuff, he sort of was the E3 guy, and now they don't have him. They don't have anyone. All right, Lewis. News item number 2. Activision have been making headlines again, Lewis. Firstly, a judge has approved Activision's $18 million settlement with the US Equal Employment and Opportunities Commission, the EEOC. The two had previously announced the settlement last September. As part of the consent decree, the $18 million will be used to compensate victims of sexual harassment and discrimination between September the 1st, 2016 and March the 29th, 2022. This applies to current employees as well as previous employees, any of whom can make a claim for, quotes, sexual harassment, pregnancy discrimination or related retaliation. This settlement will also require all quote-unquote supervisory staff to attend training on harassment and discrimination, and they will also be expanding their mental health resources that are available to employees. All of that sounds good, and is good, I suppose, but as with everything involving Activision and this sexual discrimination scandal, there is slightly more to it than that. Because Activision are still being sued by California's Department of Fair Employment and Housing, the EFEH. They have said that this consent agreement could potentially harm their ongoing case into Activision and have actually asked for a stay. However, that was denied by a judge, and as such, the DFEH are actually planning to appeal the consent agreement. Known scumbag and Activision CEO Bobby Kotick has said this regarding the settlement.
The agreement we reached with the EEOC last year reflected our unwavering commitment to ensure a safe and equitable working environment for all employees. Our goal is to make Activision Blizzard a model for the industry, and we will continue to focus on eliminating harassment and discrimination from our workplace. The court's approval of this settlement is an important step in ensuring that our employees have mechanisms for recourse if they experienced any form of harassment or retaliation.
Which all sounds very well and good, Lewis, but coming from Bobby Kotick, that might as well be written on toilet paper as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I almost burst out laughing reading him saying we want to be a model for the industry. Honestly, I almost stumbled through that.
Good grief, good grief. Secondly, Activision have been in the news again around the Microsoft deal. 4 US senators, including Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Sheldon Whitehouse and Cory Booker, 3 of whom were presidential candidates, Lewis, have sent a letter to the FTC, who are currently holding an antitrust review of the deal, stating that they believe that the deal could threaten the accountability over the sexual misconduct allegations, hinder unionisation efforts at Activision, and protect Bobby Kotick, as well as giving him an absolutely ludicrous amount of money. The senators have wrote this in their letter.
The proposed merger has already impeded unionisation efforts and undermined workers' calls for accountability. Over 1,800 Activision Blizzard employees signed a letter calling on Mr. Kotick to step down from the organisation, one of union organisers' key demands. However, Microsoft's proposed deal with Activision Blizzard is protecting Mr. Kotick, keeping him in his role as CEO until at least 2023 and guaranteeing him hundreds of millions in profit and a potential additional golden parachute worth over $14.5 million if he does not step down voluntarily. This lack of accountability, despite shareholders, employees and the public calling for Kotick to be held responsible for the culture he created, would be an unacceptable result of the proposed Microsoft acquisition.
Now, to be clear, I don't actually think Microsoft themselves have done anything wrong here. They've basically just bought a company where the CEO is a fucking dickhead. And I don't think that this is realistically going to stop the deal or anything like that. But what it might do is force Microsoft to allow employees to unionise at the very least. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's any way that Bobby Kotick's getting out of this without hundreds of millions of dollars, disappointingly. It would be great if he didn't, but I think that the best that we can hope for out of this letter is actually that the employees can organise themselves and be able to fight back when bullshit like this happens to them, you know? The sexual misconduct stuff still looms large over Activision and subsequently the Activision and Microsoft deal, which is a good thing because it definitely should not be forgotten about. Lewis, what do you make of all this? The settlement, the senators, all that?
Yeah, starting off with the settlement, I mean, I guess it's good, like, there's a pot of money there that victims can access and, you know, whatever. But it's just grubby, I think, that a company like this, you know, a company that was just bought for, what, $80 billion or whatever it was, can put a meager sum like 18 million up and let people kind of scrap over getting their little portion of it. You know, that settlement could have been way higher. It's a quirk of the justice system, I guess, that means that you can settle out of court. It means you don't have to actually go to trial over this, and there's no kind of further punishments. But
the thing is, as well, is it seems to be impeding the other investigation into them, the arguably more serious investigation into them.
Well, exactly. You know, and you could look at that and think, is there a nefarious purpose here? But did Activision know that?
Yes,
probably
is. Yes,
did.
They do.
Yeah, and go and settle so that this happens. Yeah. So, I mean, this is all legal stuff. It's way above my head, but it remains grubby. I'm glad that we are still talking about it and that others are still talking about it, because it would be easy, I think, for a lot of people to be like, okay, I've just read the headline that says that's been settled, let's draw a line under it. And it's definitely not that. And I guess that leads really neatly into the second part about these 4 senators calling for a bit of scrutiny, basically. I really like this. I totally agree with you, and I think Xbox fans should not be alarmed that this is going to disrupt the deal. Like, I'm certain it will all still go ahead. If you asked me to bet one way or another, I would say it would go ahead without any actual changes happening. But I'm really hopeful that, given their interjection here and also the profile of the people involved, I mean, we're talking about Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker. These are big names. They're big important figures in the Democratic Party in the States, and they hold weight. And so what I'm hoping we get is, one, like you said, no ability for Microsoft to stop any unionization efforts before the merger happens. And they've kind of indicated that they wouldn't stand in the way of that, but obviously Microsoft is a major corporation as well and has every reason to do so. And also, I really hope that maybe something can come from this. I'm struck by that line about the additional golden parachute Kotick would receive if he does not step down voluntarily. Maybe there can be some clause put into the acquisition that is like, the current board will have to step down in order for the deal to go through. Literally no idea if that's a thing that that anyone could insist on, if the FTC could insist on that or whatever, but I'm hopeful that people like this shining a light on this deal might lead to some positive outcomes when the deal goes through.
Sure, and yeah, I would say that, like, any positive outcomes that come of this letter would be great. What I'm really realistically hoping for is that the unionisation stuff goes through, because I think that is a real possibility. I don't think Bobby Kotick's going anywhere without his fucking money, unfortunately. But in
a lot of ways, that's the more important thing anyway. Like, the future of those workers and their ability to unionise matters more than this arsehole getting more money. Like, he's already richer than God. It doesn't really matter, you know?
Yeah, sure. Sad state of affairs, Lewis. Alright, Lewis, moving on to news item number 3. Halo's community director, Brian Sketch Gerard, has acknowledged that the Halo community is, quote-unquote, out of patience. This comes as there has been a perceived lack of progress and communication around the multiplayer specifically. In response to a Redditor who asked 343 to acknowledge the issues and delays around the multiplayer, Gerard wrote this response.
There are indeed a lot of challenges and constraints. We're certainly not happy to be unable to meet player and community expectations. It's a difficult situation that's going to take the team time to work through. Right now, the focus is on Season 2, and we'll have more to share on that in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, a lot of production planning, costing, planning, hiring, etc. is all happening, which doesn't really lend to detailed, regular updates. We understand the community is simply out of patience, and frankly, I think understandably tired of words. We just need some time for the team to get the details sorted, and then we can certainly share as much as we can.
Planning twice in there, interestingly, I've got to say.
A lot of planning, double planning.
A lot of planning. Little else, though, it appears. This all basically circulates around a lack of content for the multiplayer, particularly Forge mode, which was delayed, which is a very popular mode that allows players to create their own maps and game types, which was delayed from the game's initial release. It was then slated to be released with Halo's second season, which in itself was also delayed until May this year. But 343 are now saying that the Forge and co-op modes, which was another promised and missing feature, will now come with Season 3. And given that Season 1 has lasted nearly 6 months, it could be knocking on the door of a year before fans get round to playing these modes, which, if it's something that you're promising at launch or near launch, I think that that's really too far, you know what I mean? This also not helped by the fact that Andrew Witts, Halo's multiplayer lead, has also left the company last month, which is just the latest in a trend of Microsoft Studios somehow struggling to retain top members of staff. Like, the Halo multiplayer lead should be one of the most prestigious jobs in all of video games. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They should not be struggling to fill that role. I feel like when Halo first came out, after the long delay and whatever, it was really positive. Like, it was a positive vibe that came out around about it. I think we were even saying on here, like, I think the delay worked. I think it was good that they did it. They've clearly brought out a good game in the end here. But I think over time, specifically around the multiplayer stuff, to be clear, things have sort of started to sour over time, like around stuff like this. I think the campaign is probably still fine and all right and whatever, but that's only half the story when it comes to a Halo game, really.
Less than half, maybe even.
well, exactly. And judging by 343's continued struggles, it really is laughable that we were ever told that that game could come out at the launch of the Series X, because it is not even close to being ready even now.
Yeah. That's the key point about this. When I was reading this story, I thought it is remarkable to think that they thought that this game could come out in late 2020 when, we're now, 5-6 months on from launch. They haven't really updated anything. The fans are turning on it. I mean, even from his statement, he himself mentions that there's too much words coming out, but his statement is full of mealy-mouthed stuff about, like, what we're doing now is production planning and hiring. They're hiring. Surely everyone is on board that they needed for this. Like, this stuff was supposed to be delivered by now.
Well, they don't have a multiplayer lead anymore, so they need to be hiring people like that, you know?
Yeah, we stopped talking about Halo, obviously, because you and I weren't playing it, and it's not really our thing, but it was notable, I thought, that the conversation around Halo died down quite quickly from... I'm certain it won't have within the diehard community, obviously, but in the wider gaming community, it has died down, and you can kind of now see why. Like, clearly people have just drifted away from this game because there's other things going on, and it is not updating it. It's not progressing anything.
Yeah, exactly. I think the reason why the conversation's moved on from it is because there's nothing to talk about. It's still the same game. They've not brought out any new content. They're still in their first season, you know? I don't know. I just think that you should have a front-loading operation here. Like, there should be a lot immediately. Do you know what I mean? There should be a lot to talk about, and then you should be able to back that up with your next season. And the fact that this is already going on for 6 months, man, it's too long. It's far too long.
We still have yet to see many games get the roadmap right, and this is another one that has just kind of failed to launch with the right amount of stuff coming out for it. I do wonder, it's a question for another time perhaps, but what role does Game Pass play in this? Because would they have got away with this? Would they even have considered putting the game out if everyone had to pay full price for it? Or do they get some leeway because everyone gets to dive in for free and tens of millions of people are playing it on day one?
Interesting. Very interesting question. Probably a question for another day, but we'll circle back to it in a later episode.
Future topic of the week, perhaps.
Alright, Lewis, news item number 4. It has been claimed that subscription services, speaking of Game Pass, only account for about 4% of total revenue generated in the North American and European gaming markets. This according to Ampere Analysis Research Director Piers Harding Rolls, and was subsequently reported on by Stephen Totillo at Axios. This is a staggeringly low number to me, I would say. 4% is very, very, very low, considering all the marketing and all the push around Games Pass over the years. And now we're obviously seeing PlayStation with their PlayStation Plus subscription service join the party here a bit. It seems that between Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation Plus and Nintendo Switch Online, they only, I'm using the term only here quite loosely, generate 3.7 billion, 60% of that being Games Pass. But that compared to apparently the 81 billion that is generated in other forms of spending, that including disc sales, downloads, microtransactions, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it truly, truly pales in comparison. While obviously subscription services are not an insignificant part of the industry, obviously, and are almost certainly one of the fastest growing areas, which will only be accelerated by PlayStation's push in that direction as well, it is interesting that despite 25 million players on Games Pass, which, as I said, accounts for 60% of the subscription revenue in North America and Europe, they still aren't really moving the dial very much here. You know what I mean? We really haven't changed how we spend money on video games that much, considering what feels like a hugely important cultural impact, really, that Games Pass has made. It just is interesting that the numbers aren't really telling us the same story as all the marketing, you know? I thought this was a really, really interesting article by Stephen Totillo. Links, as always, over on the show notes at PlayersToo.com. Lewis, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was just really a really interesting little tidbit of news, because you and I do talk about subscription models a lot.
Constantly. Even off the podcast, we are constantly talking about them.
And so do a lot of other commentators on the gaming space, because it does feel like this massive disruption has been happening and is going to continue happening. But when you see these numbers laid bare, you do think, well, actually, that is kind of the marketing speaking, right? It's easy enough to launch a console and say it's all about the subscription service, but actually, as you said off air, like, the Xbox Game Pass is making 60% of 4% of the entire revenue of gaming in North America and Europe. And I think that speaks to a couple of things. It's one, that the subscription model's pricing doesn't kind of bear relation to the cost of an individual game, which obviously really serves consumers quite well, but as we were talking about last week, maybe actually is not that great for developers and publishers, generally speaking. And yeah, I would love to see more work done on that front. But also the fact that things like microtransactions or in-game purchases and just, retail sales, digital downloads, all of that stuff is still generating vastly more money. And I do suspect, we sometimes see it, the numbers around things like FIFA Ultimate Team or whatever, that, the money that makes in-game purchases and microtransactions alone would dwarf the total amount that all subscription services are making just now. I think as well, like you mentioned PlayStation Plus and Xbox Game Pass and Nintendo Switch Online there, I'm not certain, but if that number also includes all the others like EA Play and Ubisoft's subscription platform and maybe even like Stadia and Luna, which are obviously pretty minuscule at the moment, but you really think some of these services can't be making much money at all, enough for the publishers to sustain them or whatever, but it's not the big slice of the pie that I think we've been led to believe that it has been. And I think it's something to keep an eye on, that growth over the next few years. But yeah, it's not the story I think we thought we were telling.
No, I think specifically with like EA Play and whatever Ubisoft's one was as well, like I think that we're seeing those companies gravitate back towards Steam now.
Yep.
Maybe precisely because of something like this, where it's actually not worth it. Yeah, they're getting 100% profit on their games, but if no one's using your fucking platform, is it really worth it? And I think that a lot of them might now be coming down on the side of, well, no, it's not. But yeah, really interesting, really quite shocking numbers, really. Again, considering just how dominant specifically Games Pass has been in the gaming lexicon over the past 2 or 3 years, you know what I mean? It really is remarkable that it's not taking a bigger slice of the pie. Now, don't get me wrong, as I said, these areas are going to grow, but I don't know how much it's going to grow. Do you know what I mean? The prices that they're currently at. But it'll be very, very interesting to find out, Lewis. Alright, let's finish off as we always do with a couple of shout-outs. Shout-out number 1, first podcast of the month, and that means free games. On PlayStation Plus, we have Hood, Outlaws and Legends, Slay the Spire and SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. And coming to Games Pass this month, we have Cricket 22, MLB The Show 22, both coming on the 5th of April, Chinatown Detective Agency, Dragon Age 2, Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, and Star Wars Squadrons, all coming on the 7th of April. Then we have Life is Strange True Colours, Panzer Corps 2, The Dungeon of Nehelbrook, I want to say, 2, coming on the 12th of April. That is a hell of a name, whoever came up with that. And Lost in Random, which is coming on the 14th of April. So, without having massive heavy hitters in either, I actually think that both have relatively good lineups this month. I think Slay the Spire is arguably a sort of cult hit. Like, I know people that absolutely adore that game.
Yeah.
And I really, really sort of want to try it out. And SpongeBob SquarePants has its own sort of cult thing going on, and a lot of people seem to really love that game. So, I mean, great there. And on the Games Pass side, I mean, I think Life is Strange is the true standout to me there. But also, Lost in Random's a really cool little indie game, and Star Wars Squadrons that always look cool, to be honest. As well, like Dragon Age 2, Plants vs. Zombies, these are all popular games. 2 pretty good slates this month without having any like true standouts is what I would say there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm quite keen to give Slay the Spire a shot. It's one of these games that I've kind of been meaning to get around to at some point because of all the hype around it. And yeah, really excited to see Life is Strange True Colours on Game Pass. I think I'll definitely check that out at some point. And yeah, also seeing the oddness of MLB The Show on Game Pass day one. It's
always weird. It's always weird. Alright, let's shout out number 2. Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga has come out this week. Currently sitting with an 84 on PS5, an 81 on Switch, and an 82 on Series X. By all accounts, this is a pretty great game. It seems as though you can jump between all 3 of the trilogies at will, and you can drop any mission at any time and just go and explore the world. It does seem to be a true love letter to Star Wars, which is always great to see. But above anything else, and sort of like Kirby that we were talking about recently as well, the game just seems to be like a whole load of fun. I think if you have kids, honestly, you could do a hell of a lot worse than buying them some of these Lego games. I think you could easily argue that these are some of the best games that WB have put out in years, which is both tragic but telling that these are like legitimately good games. Like I think that these all look great, and anyone who actually spends any time playing them says that they're a ton of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. They're beloved, and this one in particular seems to have really sort of hit the mark. It's a reinvention slightly of the formula that they've been following for quite a long time now. These Lego games, kind of as you're saying there, Mark, they've been better than they've got any right to be generally, you know, and they are perfect for families. So yeah, if you're listening to this and you've got kids that you want to play some games with, particularly if they're into Star Wars, I can't imagine that you've not already been hounded to buy this anyway. But yeah, good on them for doing this so well, and yeah, and really leaning into that fun side of gaming and not making it super serious Star Wars all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said, like any expectations you should reasonably have for a Lego game, this blows them out of the water. Alright, let's shout out number 3. Return to Monkey Island has been announced. This sort of blew up a little bit on social media for like a day. For those of you that don't know, the Monkey Island games are a popular point-and-click adventure game from way back. Like it was sort of early 90s, late 80s, basically. But honestly, they were a little bit before our time as well, I have to say. And I also say that they are popular, but they were popular in a time where PC gaming really wasn't popular. And the entire gaming landscape was just dominated by consoles, really. To give you an idea, the first game in the Monkey Island series came out on floppy disks, which I just thought was hilarious. But these games have like a truly real cult following. And many of them would argue that the first 2 games in particular are among the best games ever made, which is, I mean, pretty fucking high praise, I have to say. There have been more games in the series, but the series has basically been dormant since 2000, outside of a not so well received Telltale game in 2009. So I think a lot of people are excited about it just for that reason alone, just because it's been out of production for so long. But also they have now got back the original creator Ron Gilbert and the original writer David Grossman is back, both of whom worked on the first 2 games before leaving LucasArts. LucasArts is now Lucasfilm Games, and they are now back as publishers as well, which is great to see. It will also apparently be picking up after the second game left off some 30 years after its release, which is just sort of fascinating to me, but it is coming out later this year. Basically, I think that this entire thing is pretty awesome and very fascinating as a sort of reboot / sequel to the original games. I think for fans of those original games, those sort of old school gamers that are kicking about now are going nuts for this and think that this is absolutely great. I think a lot of stars are aligning for this as well, which just seems to be good. I'll be very fascinated to see how well this is received as a point-and-click adventure game in the year 2022, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cult classics that, yeah, maybe quite rightly were left alone for a while. It's easy to poison a franchise like this if you overdo it. But yeah, all the excitement, as far as I can tell, comes from the fact that most of the original team, or some of the original team, are on board, and that they have kind of promised that it's going to feel like the old games, which, as we were just talking about with the Lego games, like, they were a ton of fun. They knew how to be funny, which is not something that we often get very prominently in video games. So I really hope this lands, because there'll be a lot of people who'll be kind of really upset and reminiscing about their childhood if it isn't. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested for us, even like you say, we both kind of missed it. These games were out before we were born, I think. I'm just saying that because it makes me feel young again. I just turned 30. But you know, if this comes out and it's good, I could imagine us playing it. You know, it'd be a perfect kind of play-along game. So I'm quite up for seeing what comes of it.
Yeah, sure, definitely, man. Definitely. Also, fun fact, the other sort of third man in the team that could have come back but has subsequently moved on to bigger things, I think, is Tim Schafer of Double Fine and Psychonauts, which I just thought was awesome. I never knew that about him.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
definite pedigree in this game, I have to say. Alright, listen, final shout out number 4. The games industry is still managing to put their best foot forward when it comes to the war in Ukraine. We spoke last time about how Epic and Microsoft were donating the proceeds from Fortnite to humanitarian efforts in Ukraine over like a 2-week period. In just one day, though, they managed to raise 36 million, and by the end they have now raised over 144 million, which is a truly staggering amount of money. The money will be going to 4 humanitarian organisations operating in Ukraine, namely Direct Relief, the United Nations Children's Fund, the United Nations World Food Programme, and the United Nations Refugee Agency. And, I mean, say what you want about Epic and Microsoft, but a lot of other companies could have done similar things to this, could have donated money of this magnitude, and they didn't, and Epic have, and I think that is really, really fucking cool. Fair play to them. I think that is a truly enormous achievement. But Lewis, taking a slight left turn here, but still on the subject of Epic, today they have actually officially announced the Unreal Engine 5, which we all initially seen in that ridiculous Matrix demo. They had a little presentation showing off the engine, which looks absolutely unreal. I didn't mean that to be a pun, but it is true. It seems like a whole host of studios are already using UE5, including CDPR and the Coalition, and actually quite a lot of Xbox studios, it looks like. But the presentation sort of announced the fact that Crystal Dynamics are confirmed to be working on the next Tomb Raider game, and it will be made with Unreal Engine 5, which is pretty cool, Liz.
Yeah, great to see Unreal Engine 5 sort of coming out now, and I think that they put out a couple of little tester games that I'm not sure if it's devs or if they're just available for everyone, but things that people can kind of play about with and build on within the engine, which is really great, and hopefully we'll get to start seeing some UE5 games coming out in the not too distant future. Still remember back to that original showcase they gave us with the, I can't even remember what they called it now, but that kind of female character in a sort of desert landscape that just looked absolutely incredible.
Oh sure, yeah, they were showing off their new lighting system.
Yeah, exactly.
That was truly
seems
insane.
to be kind of at the root of this, so that's great. And yeah, just very quickly to say, I totally agree. A massive well done and thanks to Epic for what they've done in supporting the people of Ukraine. Hopefully, we'll get to see some more initiatives like this still, because the war isn't over. But yeah, great to see gamers come out and support in that way. It's always really encouraging when that happens.
Absolutely, and if anyone can give in any capacity, whether it's through video games or by any other means, again, we still massively encourage you to do so, because as you rightly say, Lewis, the war is far from over, and I think it's only becoming apparent relatively recently just how bad it's been. So
Yep.
yeah, truly horrifying things still happening there. Help if you can, but big thumbs up to Epic, because that is a sensational amount of money. Alright, Lewis, I think it's time for a beer, and then we'll be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is our play-along of the Pathless, Lewis.
It is indeed, Mac. We, this month, have been playing Giant Squid's follow-up to Abzu, which was our play-along game last month. The Pathless was released after a couple of delays. It was released in late 2020. So it's one of our kind of more recent play-along games. We quite often dip into the archives a wee bit, but I played this pretty much at launch, whereas you have been playing it just recently for the first time. It's an adventure game with elements of platforming and puzzling, but it's really all about traversal and movement. That's kind of what it's all about. And obviously, as the title suggests, it's more about open world exploration than it is about following any kind of linear path, which is an idea that we will return to because it is the basic idea of the entire game.
Yes, it is.
I guess just to kick off, Max, so you, as I say, you have just been playing this recently. When we played through Abzu, you were particularly, I think even more so than I was, you were quite enamoured with Abzu and thought it was a cracking wee game. What's your kind of headline thoughts on the Pathless? Did you enjoy it? Tell me what you thought about when you were playing it.
Headline thoughts, I would say, are probably broadly similar to that, to be honest with you. Like, cracking wee game is probably about right, you know? In a lot of ways, I think that it is almost like a tech demo for Breath of the Wild. It's insane how much influence it is taken from Breath of the Wild, which makes a huge amount of sense when you think about Abzu, obviously way before Breath of the Wild, was all about like sort of natural exploration, natural storytelling, didn't have a map, didn't have waypoints, nothing like that, you know what I mean? Therefore, their next game maybe would have naturally have been quite similar to Breath of the Wild anyway, if that's the sort of thing that they are interested in as a studio. But obviously, with the impact Breath of the Wild had, I think that they've just drawn a huge amount from that, you know? Overall, though, I think it was great. I do think it was great. we were just talking a little bit off air about how we're both playing these big, huge RPGs right now. You know what I mean? And actually, to play a sort of lo-fi game like this right in the middle of it was really great. Like, it was really good for me personally. It actually made me come back to Horizon and enjoy it even more, to be honest with you, just because I had that little break in there. But the game itself was great. Like, I really enjoyed it, man. I really enjoyed it.
Good stuff. I mean, I pretty much echo all of that. I played it more or less at launch. It was one of the first PS5 games that I bought and played, actually. Yeah, really enjoyed it for that slightly more zen, kind of relaxing gameplay style. There's, you know, I'll come back to this idea in a little bit, but you know, there's no combat, and so it is literally just about free flowing exploration. What are you going to kind of discover when you're playing it? In case anyone missed our conversation on Abzu, there's a team that has spun out from the team that made Journey, right? It's the people at Giant Squid, that's in their DNA, and I think you can still feel it here as well, but you're absolutely spot on with the Breath of the Wild influences. So for anyone who hasn't been playing along with this is a game in which you play as the hunter, a kind of bow and arrow wielding character who is in this big sort of island landscape. It's very foresty. It does look a lot like Breath of the Wild in certain places. But essentially all you're doing is going around discovering these kind of god creatures, I suppose, these kind of animal gods who live on this island, and what has happened to them, why they've been corrupted by this character that we know as the God Slayer. And then there's some interesting like story beats about where that character's come from and sort of why they have decided that they have to destroy the world and remake it so that there is quote unquote one true path for people to follow. But essentially it's all about you disrupting that, but it feels very much, as you say, Mark, like a Breath of the Wild tech demo in a lot of ways. It's sort of,
I don't mean that as an insult,
no,
by the way. I know that can sound like an insult, but I don't really mean it that way. It's just a very stripped back version of that.
It's exactly that. That's exactly the phrase I was about to use, because to come on to the combat thing first of all, like, this is sort of like, imagine Breath of the Wild, except you can't technically go everywhere from minute one, because the world is sort of designed in these tiers that you unlock as you defeat the different bosses at the end of each kind of zone. And then also there is no combat, which I think
there is minimal combat, to be clear. You do have to sort of fight the god bosses.
Yeah, there's kind of
there is boss fights, but it's more puzzle focused.
Exactly,
than it is
they're big
combat.
set piece boss moments, and I'll touch on them in a second as well. But there's no incidental moment to moment combat. There's no Macaulin base that you want to take down in the way that there is in Breath of the Wild. Which, I don't know, did the game feel a little bit empty to you because of that, or do you think that was the right decision to make?
No, I was fine with that, to be honest. No, I was quite happy with that. The thing is that when you come across like a Moblin base in Breath of the Wild, I usually just avoided it. Like, I didn't get into the combat. I was I was much more interested. I was much more interested in just like exploring the area. Do you know what I mean? And going to shrines and stuff like that, which is just what this game was, but smaller. Do you know what I mean? It was just roaming about and trying to find these little puzzles and whatever. None of them were particularly challenging. There was a few that you sort of had to think about a little bit, but they were just challenging enough to be interesting, but not challenging enough that it made me want to punch myself in the face. So it did genuinely strike a nice balance there. I honestly liked that part of the game. I liked that a lot. I thought that was a good decision. I can understand why some people would go into this and feel that the world might be empty, but see, because of the way that you have to traverse the land, which is by hitting these little talismans with your bow as you're running, which in turn give you a little boost, it feels populated just because they're everywhere, even though it's not.
Really good point. Yeah. It's not like you're never firing that bow. You're constantly firing.
No, and there's always things there. You're always looking at something. You always have something in mind for what you're trying to do. You're going over here to hit that talisman, then there, then to here to get up to that big cliff or whatever. What I would say, for a game that is heavily focused on its movement, I was actually a little bit disappointed in that, I have to say. Yeah, because they do this thing where as you're holding your bow, you have to be sort of aiming at the target and holding the bow for just a little second, just until a sort of red circle appears round the talisman, then you shoot. And that effectively guarantees that you will hit it. Do you know what I mean? You could just tap it and it could go wild, or it's a sort of aiming system. They should have done away with that entirely, because see, that little second like breaks the flow every single time. Like, I thought that it was going to be like rapid fire, like I'd be firing the bow here, and I'd be absolutely zipping around. And it's not quite like that. I'm not saying it's bad, to be clear, but I'm just thinking it could have been faster paced. That is one of my criticisms of the game, but it's a pretty light criticism, if I'm totally honest, you know.
I do get that now that you've kind of explained it. One of the things I really liked about the traversal was that it almost felt like a rhythm game at times, because it was that sort of like, I'm holding, I'm releasing, I'm holding, I'm releasing, and you're kind of you are often not actually, and this feels quite unusual for a game like this, targets, you're quite often not actually looking at the character. You're looking at the environment in the middle of the screen, like what is on the kind of midpoint horizon, so that you can see which talismans are around, and you are going like, I'm trying to get up this cliff and I want to go really quickly, so I'm going to have to hit this one, then that one, then that one, and then you're kind of heading off in that direction. The movement itself was almost automatic, but your control over it felt slightly more like a rhythm game kind of thing. But yeah, the thought of going even faster would have been amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So you were thinking like it was going like pull and hit the targets, you know what I mean? Whereas I was thinking it was going to be like hit,
yeah. and if it had been
around
like that, yeah, you'd have been zipping around, and it might have been a slightly more fun game in that respect. But
the other thing I just want to mention when it comes to the traversal as well is that your sort of companion throughout this is an eagle, which I mean, that game made me care so much about that eagle, which is genuinely a testament to the writing, because it was not a long game and they made me care so much about that goddamn eagle. But another thing that you do is when you jump, you have so many flaps, which I thought was quite funny, of the eagle to make you like increase your elevation, which is how you get up steep cliff faces and stuff like that. That puts a grinding halt onto the traversal every single time, really slows you down, so you're zipping around, and then you need to go up this cliff face and it just stops, and then up quite slowly, then you get back on the top, and then you're zipping about again. It's just a wee bit stalled, you know what I mean? So the traversal, which is something that I thought would be one of the highlights of the game for me, but actually turned out to be a wee bit disappointing. Again, I'm using
I think
it's a very minor criticism,
I think that's fair as well.
The puzzle stuff, the story stuff, the environment itself blew me away. Like, it far exceeded my expectations, I've got to say. Really impressed with the game in general.
Let's touch on two of those things quite quickly then as well. So story-wise, I mean, I'm not going to recap the entire game here just now, but yeah, it is essentially about kind of cleansing this land. Very typical adventure game stuff.
Sure.
You're trying to stop the God Slayer from sort of destroying the world and killing the Eagle Mother. When we spoke about Abzu, we both kind of were like, it was a really fun game. The story basically didn't matter. You know, you were emotionally invested with the shark in that game in a kind of an interesting way, but basically it was about exploring this world and getting to the end of it. Do you think the story really matters here, or is it the same kind of idea?
No, actually, I would say that they've really cranked the story up in this one, I have to say, you know. Like, I enjoyed it. Like, I did enjoy it, as they said. So one of the things that happens fairly frequently is that you can get into these situations where you're basically in the bad zone of a particular map, where you're sort of being hunted by one of the sort of corrupt gods. And in that moment, your bird sort of gets a little bit corrupted themselves, and every time that happens you have to physically clean the bird, which that sounds a bit weird, but it basically involves like just brushing its feathers and stuff like that, which means that you have to take time to be like in this sort of weirdly intimate moment with this bird, which happens, I don't know, 5 or 6 times at least throughout the entire game, apart from all the other like deliberately emotionally evocative story beats that are going on in the writing, you know. And it really does bring this weird connection to this bird, and I think it's a testament to the writing again that they've accomplished that in such a short space of time. I mean, this game is not long. Like, this is a not long game, maybe 6 hours.
Something like that, 6 to 8 or something, I would have said,
Yeah. I thought the writing was very, very good here, considering that they were coming from Abzu, where it was more environmental and wasn't so much traditional storytelling, whereas this was more that, and I enjoyed it for it. Like, I thought that they'd done a great job in the story. Like, I was invested in what was happening, and I think that's all you can really ask for in 6 hours, you know?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely crucial to it, because in a lot of ways the gameplay never really evolves to any great extent. You know, from minute one it is that traversal system, and it is some pretty standard. I mean, the puzzles, again, they're video game 101. It's, you know, use the mirrors to bounce your arrows around. It's reposition this light beam, you know, you're like, oh, here's the light puzzle, here's the water puzzle, you know, and that's fine and that's good, and that, you know, it's fine for them to lean into that stuff, but the story does actually drag you kind of through the game a bit more. I think it would be quite easy to play it for 10 minutes and then drop off, particularly actually this game came out on Apple Arcade at launch as well, and it was actually used to kind of sell Apple Arcade right at the beginning.
Right, man.
It was a big part of their promotional push. Yeah, and it's weird to think, you know, I was playing it on PS5 right at the launch of that, and it was available on my iPhone as well, but it's the kind of game that on a mobile you might play for 10 minutes and go like, yep, this is fun and quick, but that'll do. But the story does make you want to kind of stick with it, and bizarre and kind of fascinated to find by the end that both Troy Baker and Laura Bailey were prominent figures in the game.
The only two characters with a voice,
yeah, it's, you know, Troy Baker in particular is just like, what the fuck are you doing in this game? But whatever. I thought, the story compared to Abzu in particular, and even kind of similar to Journey, you know, it built on those things. It took their kind of core, I guess, design philosophy of like, let people explore and tell a story in a very kind of gentle and subtle way, but just added enough on top of that to make it a compelling kind of action adventure game.
Definitely.
You also just really quickly, you mentioned the world and we haven't really touched on the art style, which we often talk about in games like this.
That's all you need to know. It's just fucking fantastic.
A beautiful environment to spend time in. I thought that was one of the things.
So good.
After our Abzu chat, I kept saying, like, if you enjoyed that world, you're going to really get something from this as well.
No, definitely. The game looks absolutely stunning. The art style, absolutely fantastic. They lean into it. It's good. It really is great. One other small complaint I would have, I just remembered my other sort of small complaint, is that it is very, 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 up until the last sort of level, effectively, very formulaic, which I thought that they could have done more. Like, basically, you get to a new island, you light these 3 towers, that then unveils the monster to you. You then do a sort of weird chase thing, which I'd never really understood, and then you get teleported to the actual boss arena where you properly like fight the boss in a sort of, as you said, it's more like set piecey / puzzly than it is like true combat in a lot of ways. And that happens predictably the exact same way every single time. And I just thought, like, if you'd have just changed each of these, like, 10% more, it would have been so much better. But again, this is a relatively minor complaint. I very much enjoyed this game.
You can feel it's kind of Nintendo DNA there as well, that it's kind of got the 3-part structure to the boss fights. I really enjoyed those chases and those boss encounters. I remember when I spoke about it, when I first played it, kind of comparing it to Death Stranding, the way that it took you out of the main map and kind of put you in this weird other zone. It was like the bright red light that overwashes everything when you're playing it. I thought it was really,
like, see when you go from the last
really
tower
atmospheric,
and you fly into that, like, for the first time to like chase down the monster. That is a cool fucking moment. Like, that was badass. That was great.
The stealth sections that, you know, you're trying to avoid their gaze at that point, like, that stuff was not as great, but thankfully, like, not very difficult and over quite quickly, so it didn't overstay its welcome in the way that even in something like Death Stranding at times it felt like, oh fuck, I just want this to be over now, you know. But I thought that was a really cool added thing. Like, they could have had boss fights that felt way more just like a normal encounter, and I thought that they kind of experimented with that in a really interesting way.
No, definitely. Well, I think we can safely say we would both recommend this game, Lewis. I think that we both thoroughly enjoyed it. I think that it takes what Abzu had and what was good about Abzu and what was good about Journey, I suppose, and really just built on that. And honestly, I think that this studio is maybe one game away from true greatness. This is a good studio, a very, very good studio, and I'm genuinely excited to see what their next game is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, it does feel like they're on a trajectory that in a couple of games' time we'll be talking about them as a really exciting part of the industry, particularly if they can keep this team together. You know, Austin Wintory's score here again, which we're not even touched on.
Oh my god, I forgot about that. It was so good. Oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah, stylistically across the art style and the music, just a beautiful game. I think that would be my takeaway. I definitely recommend it. Certainly if it's reduced, if it's in a sale or whatever, I would really hope that it would come to PS Plus, maybe the new PS Plus thing, because it feels like it fits in really well there. Yeah, it's the kind of game that you want to use to break up your big fucking RPG. If you're currently playing Elden Ring, if you're currently playing Horizon or anything like that, this is a nice chill zen game to boot up for an hour at the end of the night just to kind of carry you off to bed, and you'll really enjoy it, I think.
I can 100% confirm that is true. Alright, Liz, I think we've got to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And genuinely, thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You are an absolute legend to us. It is now time to announce our new play-along game for this month, Liz. And speaking of not delving back into the archives and delving back to only last year, it's The Artful Escape, which I think we are both really looking forward to playing, but I mean was up for a whole load of game awards and just looks like a fantastic little gaming experience that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, me too. It's one that the hype and the buzz around it at award season last year really caught me off guard, and I'm kind of keen to see what it was that people were so excited about. So this one, it's available kind of on every platform. It is on Game Pass if you're a subscriber, so that might be a good way to check it out. But play along with us. I think it's going to be an exciting one. Yeah, definitely. I'm really, really looking forward to this one, genuinely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week. Thanks.